I had all these amazing people that have been here, some of them from day one, around me today. And I think that's a big part of the success just in general of any business. It's almost like a twofold kind of when we say, people-centric or customer satisfaction. Our staff are my customers, and then, the guests coming in the offices are their customers.
Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, we are talking with Dr. Sulman Ahmed, the founder and CEO of DECA Dental Group, the company behind the Ideal Dental brand, known as the Starbucks of dentistry. Dr. Ahmed sits on the board of advisors for Tufts University School of Medicine, where he received his Doctor of Dental Medicine degree. He is also the president of the Association of Dental Support Organizations, which we all refer to as the ADSO. Dr. Ahmed recently wrote his first book called Make Them Smile: Why Customer Satisfaction is the Key to Rapid and Sustainable Growth. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ahmed. How are you?
Good, Mike. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. First off, I've read your book in anticipation of this conversation. I enjoyed it very much. Why was it important to you to write this book?
Yeah, so, the book wasn't really supposed to be a book. It started off as a diary I just wanted my kids to have. So I started writing it right after COVID, just so they would kind of know some of the struggles or the decisions or kind of how life got to where it did. And, as we all think about our own lives and you think about your father or grandfather, you may know what they did, where they worked, how it all went. But I think a lot of times we don't share like the emotions and what that actually meant to open your first location or your first job or, coming to a new country and all the different kind of feelings and emotions tied into that. So it started out just for that, and it was never going to be shared. And then it kind of started evolving. I had, for the last 10 years, I've had a lot of business people, entrepreneurs, dentists reach out and say, hey, I'm at 3 locations. How do I get to 10? Or how did you get from 10 to 50? Or how do I know when I need to bring in a CFO? And, what do I need to pay them? And how do I fund this? And how many personal guarantees should I have? So it all started like I had all the material or playbooks, as I like to call them. And then after, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I just decided there's like too much information. And for the most part, 80% of the questions are all the same. It's like, I've been doing this for 2 years. Why is it not working? And in the book, I say, because I try to simplify it where it applies to most people. It takes at least 10 years to be successful in anything. You got to be 10 years of good to finally be great. And I think in this world, everyone's just looking for a quick, Instagram answer there. And so I think it put a lot of things in perspective. And then I think lastly, I just felt like you reach a certain point in life and giving back maybe. But I think more than that was just, I look back, I'm like, holy cow, like, I don't know if I was supposed to make it given the odds and how much debt I was in and all the stuff that happened. And I think there's so many other people I come across that are so scared to take that next step, whether it's in life, personal, professional, whatever. And hopefully this book is a little bit of an answer where they're like, hey, if he could do it, then I can certainly do it. And, my situation is not as bad as him. So why have I not started? And so I share a lot of that in the book.
I'm curious, you just mentioned fear. And, one of the things that I really appreciated in the book, it was a bit of a kind of an ongoing theme, like your relationship with fear and how you use it and kind of embrace it. Can you talk about kind of how you've learned to live with fear and use that to kind of power some of the things that you do?
Yeah, and look, I think everyone has a very different personality. So I'm not saying everyone needs to go out and do what I did, but I think the people naturally reading this book are going to be somewhat wired similarly. And the feedback I've gotten from some of the earlier copies is like, when I read the book, it feels like you're talking to me. And I've had that from people who are not dentists and people who are dentists and business people and young and old. And I love that. Fear for me, I've always felt that if you're not growing, it's just, if you're not growing in some kind of way, whether it's personally, then life kind of gets boring and stagnant. And some people, hey, they don't want to have the risk. They want the stability. Same thing day in, day out. The predictability is fun. For me, and it's not just dental offices, it's even personal. Like you have a goal that you work towards, whether it's better sleep or better working out or eating better, working with a kid on something they're not the best at, and the same thing happens in business. And so I've always found to take that next step to grow, because it's always what's next, there's a certain amount of fear. And I think there's healthy fear and there's bad fear. But I think when you're about to do something really, really great, you get to that line where you don't really know if this is healthy or bad. So everyone's like, oh, the interest rates of this, I'm taking this risk. And my story was like, I'm gonna do 2 locations right off the gates instead of 1. And so there's a little bit different risk there. And looking back, I don't know if that was a healthy risk or not. It just, in my case, luckily worked out. But you've got to take those chances. And the book, I was so nervous to get this published because it's the first time. I mean, for those of you that know me, I keeps things very kind of close to the vest, and I'm a very personal space kind of guy. I don't like sharing too much of the personal information, but it really was like, if I can get one person and impact their life, and they're like, they go out and do something great and maybe become like the next DECA, then this book would have been totally worth it. And so I think that's where you have to look at fear and look at the cause. But I've always found, like, whenever I'm about to do something great, it's just at that tipping point where you have that feeling in your stomach where you're like, I don't know, and you just write it out, and it's like a thrill.
You really do put yourself out there in this book, and you share a lot of great stories about your childhood and growing up and moving to the United States, and kind of all of the stories of the challenges that you faced in the launching of your business. One of my favorite stories, actually, I think a lot about, there's these decisions that you make in life that really kind of alter the course of what ends up happening. And if you make the opposite decision, things would be totally different. And when you moved to Jacksonville, you tell a story in there about a phone call with your dad. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, I can share a lot about that. And to be honest, even how I ended up in Jacksonville, I was so embarrassed to ever share the whole story on that, until it just got to a point where I didn't really care, because I just thought people would think, what an idiot. And so I'll share a little bit about that. I growing up in Zimbabwe, to get to the US, it's not like there's a million people telling you how to do it. There's basically like one person at the US consulate who kind of controls all of this. So my dad dropped me off on a Saturday morning. I walk up these stairs, small little office. There's a lady behind the counter. And she's like, hi. I'm like, hi. And she's like, can I help you? I'm like, I'm here to apply for colleges, in the US. She's like, great. And she points me towards a book. It was the Barron's Guide. It was chained so that no one would steal it. It had every college in there. And at that time, I didn't even know, like, I knew where New York was, but I didn't know any of like where the other geographies and where the other places were. And so I looked at the book for about a minute or two. Crap, what am I supposed to do? There's like, I don't know, 55,000 colleges in here. And so I turned around to her and I'm like, yeah, how do I decide where I go out of these? She said, well, where do you want to go, son? And I was a 18-year-old boy at this time, and we used to get Baywatch and other American shows come in, but they would come in like about 6 months after they had aired here. And went from MacGyver, A-Team to all that fun stuff to like finally Baywatch was a cool thing. Like, oh my gosh, America's awesome. The beaches, everyone's like so good looking and tan, and there's fancy cars, and you're driving around. And I was like, that's where so I was like, I want to go where they shot the show Baywatch. And she smiled at me like she knew exactly what I was talking about. And she said, oh, son, you want to go to Florida? They have great beaches there. So not realizing Baywatch was in California, I'm like, yeah, great. So I go, everything's in alphabetical order. I pick, go to F, I pick Florida. And I'm like, ma'am, how many colleges should I apply to? Because Florida itself had like a whole bunch. She's like, I would play it safe, apply to 2 at least. So I'm like, sounds good. So I just, that tuition, male to female ratio, all of that stuff. I just picked University of Miami, and I was like, let me pick another area, that's not in the same. So I picked Jacksonville, University of North Florida in Jacksonville. And I applied to both. And while I was leaving, she was like, by the way, you need to take a test called the SATs. That's going to be offered in 2 weeks at a different high school. So I'm like, all right, great. So I got the information. It was going to have the fax number and everything. Show up at a different high school to take the test, the SATs. There's like 3 other kids or 4 other kids taking it with me. We sit down, and the instructor goes, all right, here's your stuff. Just bubble in the answers. And I was, what is bubble in? And, I'd never done multiple choice in my life at that point. And anyways, did decent, got into those 2 schools. was going to go to Miami because by that time I searched Miami on our dial up and I was like, that looks better than Jacksonville. And then my dad walks in on a Sunday morning in that summer. I was supposed to start that fall. And he goes, you can't go to Miami. It's just not safe. Even famous people are getting killed. We don't want you to get hurt. And it was Versace had just gotten shot outside his house. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to get shot either. I'm going to go to Jacksonville. And I go to Jacksonville and it was nothing like Baywatch. It was nothing like America I'd imagined. And I was rooming with a guy, Dave, at the time. And after about a week, he was like, I don't understand what the constant references to Baywatch have to do with anything. I was like, well, that's the whole reason I came to America. And that's why I'm here. And he was like, this is Jacksonville, Florida. Baywatch is in California. He goes, it's six hours flying the other way. And that's when it dawned upon me, like, oh my God, like such a big decision. I left my house, came by myself, 18, 19 hours flying, and I have no chance. Like I can't even pick where I'm going. But to your question, I just wanted to come back home. I was homesick. Jacksonville didn't have any public transportation. I didn't have a car. So, you're just eating campus food, which only had like two places really. And it was just, I was like, this is not what I thought it was. I'm out. And I remember I had to go to a bookstore, buy a calling card, and then go to a payphone, put the pin, call, and there's a time difference, so I finally speaking to my dad and I kind of broke down. I was like, look, I just don't like it. I'm sorry. I made this decision and I suck. And, I'll just have to come back and figure out what I'm going to do. And yeah, he said something at that point because I totally given up. And he said, all right, well, look, you're out there anyways. Think of it as a vacation and just hang out for another week or two and then just come back. And that took all the pressure off of me. And my whole mindset changed in terms of, I'm like, I'm going to enjoy and try to make the most out of what's left here. And then I'm heading home. A week later, I was like, man, I've kind of made some friends. It's not so bad. It's not Baywatch, but it's not bad. Another week went by and, I called my dad and, I was like, hey, like maybe I'll hang out another week or two. And then, does the offer still stand? And he was like, yeah, you're there anyways, and you paid for a semester's tuition. But I think of a lot of things in life that way, where at times we all want this glorious kind of thing. I had dentists come and meet me. We're still in school and having graduated, and they're like, oh, I want to do what you did. So I don't want to go the traditional dentist route. I want to have a bunch of locations. And I just look at them like, how do you even know that? Like you haven't even picked up a handpiece and worked on a real patient outside of school. But I think the message of that whole story is, we have these ambitions and we want this amazing thing. And then we go out and little things happen that really scare you because the practicality of anyone who's built a business is, it's easy to look at what it looks like now without understanding like those little sacrifices that were made. And not everyone who goes to college has to make that sacrifice. This was unique in my situation. It just disrupted everything I'd culturally grown up, the language, different understanding of cultures and people. So that was the whole gist of that was, if you've thought it through and if it's a good thing, stick it out a little bit and take some of the pressure off. Like, what do you have to lose? And we just overthink a lot of things. I still do it at times, so that's why we use that story in there.
Yeah, I love the story. There's so many like lessons out of that too. It's if you set the wrong expectations, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. And as a father, when I hear the story of kind of what your dad said to you, I think in my head, would I like be comfortable enough to have that conversation with my son, or would I be pushing? Like, I feel like the inclination I might have initially is, no, you have to do this. You've got to do better. This is something versus like taking the pressure off. So it just showed a huge amount of emotional intelligence too.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of fear probably on his part too, right? Because I'm a father too, like you, and if my kid was 18 hours away and he was miserable and tearing up on a payphone, and I knew I couldn't even call him back, and I had like so many minutes before, we used to have like those beeps, that let you know,
right.
Minutes left on the calling card. Yeah, I don't know if I'd have probably wanted to run and hug him or try to save him or do whatever I thought to protect him. But I think that again, to your point, I talk about emotional intelligence and the ability to use your gut and then make some of those decisions. But again, I think it's probably just as courageous on his part to just leave me out here.
Can you talk a little bit about your work-life balance?
I talk about this in the book today too. I just feel like we live in a world today where everything's about work-life balance. And to achieve greatness in anything, if that's what you aspire to do, if you want to be a balanced person, great. Just balance out how much you work and how you want to spend your time. But if you want to be great at anything, you've got to skew that balance at times. I'm not saying your whole life needs to be one extreme, but if you want to be a great athlete, that means probably 10, 15 years of your early life are just heavily skewed towards training and practicing and dedicated to that. And then it balances out maybe over time, and when you retire or you're not as able to compete at that level. And so same thing with building a business. It's a 7-day a week, 24 hours a day. The phone can ring at any time. It is your problem. It's not, oh, well, it's not someone else will fix that. There is no somebody else. It's just you. And it's the world, everyone's kind of working for themselves, and you got to try to figure out and build a company within that. And so I just have a strong belief whenever I hear work-life balance, to me, that's someone who just is okay just being who they are. But for anyone who aspires to be great at something, you're going to have to skew that balance at some point. And that means sometimes you have to miss, your kids' sports games. That means sometimes you don't get to go out and party or hang out on Fridays and Saturday nights because you're just so tired because you worked, and you want to wake up on Sunday and go look at different sites that you want to build locations on before the traffic hits, and other things kind of take over. But that's, I think my first, having a grand vision, I think it all ties in. You've got to believe in what you want almost to a fault if you want to build something, right? That obsession's a must, and that obsession takes care of the balance itself, because you're just happiest when you're doing this one thing and you're just in the zone, and you've got to prioritize around that. And again, this is not saying, I don't want this to be misunderstood where, if someone's married and has kids, I'm like, tell them, forget about your wife and kids and just focus on work. That's not what I'm saying. But at some point, you're going to have to give up something. And sometimes it's worth it. And sometimes you give up a lot of stuff and it just doesn't work out. And, you learn from that, and you move on.
The reality is sacrifices are absolutely required, and it's almost disingenuous if you're trying to share with people, oh no, you can do this and stay balanced. So I appreciate that message. When you were in dental school and you started to think about your grand vision, how did that kind of all come together and coalesce?
So the grand vision at dental school, it started as an insecurity. I share that, I was first at dental school. I just finished my undergrad, walked on Saturday. Monday, I'm starting dental school. And I, fly out to Boston. I'm in this class with 150 kids from all over the country. And the dean's is like, who wants to be an orthodontist? Who wants to be a surgeon? And a bunch of hands are going up. And I'm just looking around like, man, I barely made it in here. And this is our first day. How do you know? Like, I don't even know what I want to be. Like, I barely, I'm just happy I'm going to be a dentist. And I just looked around the room and I'm like, I don't even know. And it was like this emptiness and like, oh God, here we go again, all over like another level. And I just thought to myself, I was like, one day it would be great to have 10 offices and have all of us kind of working together. I'll have all kinds of specialists working together. And that got implanted in my head somewhere. Honestly, I didn't think about it for years. But there was something from that moment. And I think there's everything in our life, there's something we can kind of learn from, whether it's a good or a bad thing. Every meeting, I always just tell my kids and anyone around me, every meeting's a good meeting, even if it doesn't work out or someone's trying to sell you something, but you don't want to do it, but you learn something, and you don't know how those people or those things will kind of come back full circle. And so, the grand vision was like 10 offices one day. That's how I'm going to have this chip on my shoulder, and I'm going to prove that I also know what I'm doing, and I'm better than, everyone. And so that kind of carried forward and manifested itself in different ways, and just working really, really hard and feeling like, all right, I have it figured out, but I'm going to work harder than everybody. I'm going to show up earlier, stay late, treat, in pre-clin, and when we started our clinical rotations, just hustle as much as I can, fit as many patients in, and I'll do 3 a day where others would just do like, 1 a day or 2 a day. And then when one location started, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, I was still practicing a lot, but I still had this vision of like, where's all this going? And if I can continue doing it and doing it well, where, the patient or customer service and our guest experience is not compromised, and we can build systems to ensure it can happen and scale without me necessarily being the dentist, then why not keep going? And so that's started manifesting itself. And that's where the name, DECA as our parent company that supports our locations kind of came from. It was from the ambition of one day having 10 locations.
How many locations are there right now with DECA in total?
So we have about 153 open locations and about another 40 or so in some stage of development, from either we're waiting on the land to be turned over, or we're getting our final CO to open up. Probably just under 200 today.
Okay. So in hindsight, you set this expectation of 10, and like that seemed like a really big goal at the time. At what point did you kind of recognize this is going to become so much bigger than I initially thought?
I think that journey still kind of continues. We had our 15-year celebration, and I didn't coin DECA or put the corporate structure together until 2013, when we had surpassed. I always share stuff after we've surpassed something. So I would have never said, we're going to call it DECA and we're going to have 10 locations. We're at 2 or 3. So I waited till we're at almost 20 to kind of form the parent company and say that was the goal. The same way I look at us, I'm like, if in the last 10 years we got from, this to 200, how many can we do in the next 10 to 15 years? Can we grow at that same rate? Maybe not. I think we have a lot of structure and things in place that almost feels like anything is possible at this time. I think there was a point where we were at about 20-ish, 25 locations and in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And we were absolutely I feel like every new patient looking for a dentist came to our offices. And, everyone knew the brand and we dominated this market. And then we started having, since 2012, 13, a lot of other big players from the DSO world start entering the market. And so you have the DSOs, you have the M&A guys, and you have the de novo guys. And I think they're very different. And then you have the branded, and then you have the non-branded. And again, that's very different. And so if you look at de novo branded, there's not too many doing that. And so we would see these guys come in, or groups come in and just open 15 locations in a year. And at that time, the banks were only giving me capital for 7 locations a year, and that's about all they could do. So that's where there's a point where I'm like, look, we're competing with these groups that have hundreds of locations already and have been around so much longer. And their dentists would come and talk to us, and we'd hear that, and something just clicked. I'm just like, I want to go for that. That there was a moment where it's like, yeah, what we've done here, we kind of own this market, and you guys are all playing, and we're out competing and outdoing you guys, and we have a better training system. Our staff is happier, our patients are happier. I want to do this everywhere we go. And that was, the step. I was like, all right, I'm going to need more capital, and I'm going to just have to go all in. So that was probably the second big fear kind of moment. Like, are we really doing it? I think early on was just like, can I even make it? Does this even work? And there's all that. This time it's like, I already know it's working in Dallas. Can it work nationally? Can this brand be a national household brand? And that's kind of how I took off.
You just mentioned there's not a lot that we're doing branded de novo as a model. So it was really unique. And I think the reasons for all the success that you have had is the Ahmed doctrine, as you call it, and kind of that being core to how you approach business. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I think I've always put people at the forefront of what we do. And so as the company's kind of evolved, we started out as we need to take care of the patients. And so it's not about what we want, it's about what the patient wants. And that's toothaches happen all the time. It's not like a Monday through Thursday kind of deal, right? And so we're like, let's open up Fridays and Saturdays. Let's have these retail locations like the Starbucks of dentistry, and let's offer more than just coffee or just general dentistry. Let's offer specialty. And so that's how the business started. And then as we kind of started growing up, I had all these amazing people that have been here, some of them from day one, around me today. And I think that's a big part of the success just in general of any business. It's those key people, those key relationships that they all change and evolve, and needs change, and people come and go, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But the business kind of started switching to the opposite of taking care of the patients, and we at the support team need to take care of our people. So it's almost like a twofold kind of, when we say, people-centric or customer satisfaction, our staff are my customers, and then the guests coming in the offices are their customers. So that's kind of how the company kind of evolved.
There's a lot of call outs about, staying late if a patient needs to be seen and kind of going above and beyond and just kind of creating that culture of making sure that the patient's always being taken care of. And you shared a lot of examples of kind of you leading in that way. And I think that's really powerful. You mentioned that the first job that you fired yourself from was dentistry, and kind of going from that transition of working in the business to working on the business. What were some of the hardest things for you to overcome in that move?
Yeah, I think the whole notion, and every dentist who's looking to expand, and I think I talk to so many dentists who are like, I have 3 locations or 4 or 5, and yeah, it's all going awesome. And I always ask them, how many locations are you working in? And they're like, 3 or 4 or 5. Those do better, and how do the ones where you're not working do? And they're like, yeah, well, when I leave for a month, I go here, that one does well, and then the other one kind of drops. And what that tells me is it's not really a scalable business. And the biggest, I think, first realization was, I thought if I'm going from 1 to 2 locations, the patients are going to be so upset, and they're all going to want to follow me, 25 miles away, because I'm just the greatest dentist and I have great bedside manner. I can do all this stuff, and they just genuinely love me. And that was like the first reality. I think it's a lot of it is about convenience, and that happened to some extent, but not as much as I thought. And so I quickly kind of realized, is like, if you can make the experience about the patient, and it's just kind of like going to the pharmacy, right? When you go to CVS or Walgreens, you're not for a second thinking, is a pharmacist going to screw up my antibiotic, and what if it's not right and I get sick? It's not even a thought. And we try to do that across dentistry, and can you standardize dentistry where all dentists are within certain guidelines? Can you train them to make sure that the quality of dentistry is just great all around, and you don't have too many outliers? And so we focused on that, just because I realized the patient's not really coming to see me. They're coming because I'm open Saturdays and I take their insurance, and they know exactly where our location is, and we offer warranty on our dental work, and we do specialty and all of that kind of stuff. And so I would say that was the first kind of reality check, where it's like, it's really not about me.
Can you share some of those guidelines that you put in the playbook for the clinical part of your business to ensure that consistent care?
Yeah, I think, look, we realized a lot of patients. So for example, if you come in for an exam and you have one filling, and it's not going to take long to do, we realize patients don't want to schedule 2 months out to come back and take another hour out and then another 30 minutes to drive and come to the appointment. So is there a way we could do same day treatment and build that into our kind of philosophy, and schedule accordingly, where we have gaps in the schedule to allow for that? So that was one thing. And then the other thing was just the clinical quality. We created a clinical board. So if you think about a single dentist out there who claims they're a great dentist, they absolutely may be, but based on what? Like, no one's really looked at their work and said, yep, that's a perfectly finished root canal, and the margins and the crown look great, perfect. So that was the first thing. As we started expanding, you have all your business functions where it's X amount is supposed to come in and go into your bank, and so you have to check all those things off. But what happens to the clinical quality when you're not in that office? How do you check that? And so we very quickly, even back then, would virtually created like a little clinical board, where if you're coming into our culture and our group of doctors, you're paired with a mentor, whether you've been out, it's your first day out of school, or you've been out 10, 15, 20 years, just to kind of share some of the best practices that we've picked up over the years from different continuing educations and schools of thought around what's most efficient for the patient and the best kind of products to put in their mouth. And that's been invaluable. So whether that's auditing, random chart audits, if dentist is doing a root canal and it's kind of, things get complicated, they've got, specialists available to them right away to go ahead and check, and make sure if they need any kind of guidance or need to be referred. So we started putting all that structure in place. And then the hands-on clinical training was big too, on how to do certain procedures, to the point where, now we have our own in-house CE that's approved and accredited. So we do a lot of our training in-house. I mean, just last weekend, there's implant training here. I think there's 10 or 15 doctors learning that. Invisalign, again, we've got some of the best Invisalign instructors that are part of the DECA team now. And so that journey's kind of continued, but it's very, very heavy on clinical. And I think that's one thing people don't understand. And I talk about in the book in terms of core competency. Like, you can't go build a great dental business if you're not a good dentist to begin with. Like, you've got to be, that's just a non-negotiable in anything. Even if you want to build a auto body repair thing, if you don't know the first thing about how to be really great at that, then you can't really teach it to anybody. So that was the first thing, that was just, how do I become a great, efficient dentist where my patients are not feeling me numb them up because I have a certain technique, and the temperature of the anesthetic, and they don't feel anything there, and they're like, oh, you're already done, I didn't even feel that. And then the work's done really efficiently and fast. They're like, oh, I'm done. Yeah. And so those little moments of wow on the customer experience just go a long way. And I talk about in the book too, the three things we're solving for in dentistry and healthcare, but also in most businesses. It's time, money, and fear, right? It's a customer's thing is like, all right, how long is it going to take? And so if you're going to say it's going to take me 3 hours, well, that's half a day for somebody. So can you get them done in 35, 40 minutes to an hour to get at least the process started? How much is this going to cost, right? So is there a component of self-pay? Insurance is covering some. If not, how can you help me kind of pay for that? And fear, is this going to hurt? That's just a very natural human thing. As much as we, different businesses, I think going to get an ice cream is, people probably look forward to more than, going to the dental chair as much as. So how do we take that fear out? For us, having a brand and the ability to build from scratch, we control every aspect of that. So there's just as much thought put into like the patient and what they see and perceive and smell. So the wall color in our offices is a certain color because it's neutralizing and calms them. The way our offices smell is a certain way. The way we answer our phones, it's like, Ideal Dental, how can I make you smile today? So it's not like, oh, I've got to call and make this appointment. It's like, oh, you said something different. You said, how can I make you smile? Most of the time, patients are already smiling when you kind of say that. We make sure you can never hear a handpiece, so you don't have the typical dental kind of office smell. So there's so many details that go into it that are just beyond dentistry and clinical and have everything to do with relating to people.
And the great thing with the book is you go into all of that, and you kind of outline. It's not only offering a lot of strategy and kind of strategic approaches, but a lot of like little tactical things. You also mentioned not hearing a drill, and when you're having financial conversations, being able to do those in privacy so that the customer is comfortable with that. And so there's just so much thought put into each little step. You just mentioned the training for implants and Invisalign, and that kind of speaks to a culture of continual growth. Are there other things that you do within your organization, maybe not necessarily just on the clinical side, but to support the growth of the people that work?
Yeah, business training is huge. We love, part of our story is, if you're growing and it's organic growth, right? You're building a new office, you have 0 patients, 0 revenue, 0 staff, 0 profits. And so everything is new, and so all you can do is grow. And so when we think about that in terms of people, we have a path to leadership for every position, whether you're a dental assistant, front office manager. And so there's a lot of business training, and as we kind of grow, trying to elevate people within the company. And so I love seeing people promoted from within the company because they already understand the culture. So there's a lot of training in that, and then there's a lot of one-on-one mentorship, and we try to do that with all of our direct reports. But I spend, almost an hour a week with all my direct reports, where it's just a one-on-one where we're just talking through. A lot of times it's business, a lot of times it's personal, because they're going through something in their life. And sometimes I have no expertise on, or sometimes I've dealt with exactly that kind of situation, because that's the reality of any business that's built to last. Is it's really about the people. And if those people believe in you as a leader, and they're humans, life is going to happen to them. People are going to pass away in their life. There's going to be divorces. There's going to be issues with kids. And if nothing else, just them knowing that you understand, because that changes the way as a leader I'm towards them. They may be a little slow in what they should have done. And instead of me just kind of pushing that, I have to understand that they're going through something, and then I have to be supportive, but at the same time, make sure the needs of the business are being met. So that's how I really encourage more leaders to do that.
In 2008, approximately, you launched Ideal, and by 2021, you closed the deal with Blackstone, the company valued at $500 million. By any professional measure of like success and achievement, you've been incredibly successful. What are your driving motivations now? And is it a challenge? Like, is there a challenge to stay motivated? Like when you have like an event that happens like that, does it shift your mindset at all and how you move forward?
I think it's different for different people. I've had people where they stopped, working and retired very, very early, like way too early. And they're happy with that because they're like, it's not. So I think the money was just like a validation, and it was just like, all right, you did it. I look at it as like, I mean, this morning I've been in my office since 7 a.m. just because I like being here. The growth, going back to the fear and the growth, I feel like if I've been put in this position to impact lives, now I can impact even more lives. And going back to, I can even impact more lives of our staff, and then they can impact even more patients. And, we have thousands of patients coming through our stores every day. Many of them are new patients coming in every day. And so we look and we track and we appreciate all that. So I look at it as like, I've been blessed with now a bigger platform to do even bigger and better things. But I think it comes down to what's driving you. I think my driving force is the same as what caused me to start the business. So it was never a financial kind of goal. It was more about like how many lives can you really change. But I think it's different for each person, and I don't judge that. I've had many people who are part of the journey that if they got a nice payday and they were kind of like, I'm done, and that's fine. And so but for me, I think it's even more inspiring now because there's different things we can do. I'll give you one small example. Post COVID, there's all this change in like the dental workforce, and a lot of assistants left the dental industry after COVID, and just went into, you had Chick-fil-A paying more than dental jobs were at one point. And so we just decided to create our own dental assisting school, and we're not going to charge anyone who wants to come in to be a dental assistant. We're not going to charge them anything, and we're going to get them certified. So most dental assisting schools, you come in, you pay a fee, and you get licensed, and you become an RD, and then you go and you find a job. We did virtual fairs for people who had never been in dentistry, many of them, but were interested in healthcare. We brought them in, we trained them on our dime. We paid them hourly to come in and learn. And then we gave them the option, once they're certified, to go work wherever they wanted to work. So I looked at that as doing good for our industry, and they're going to go and help patients and another doctor, whether it's at our company or not. And I do believe in that kind of coming back full circle, because a lot of them end up staying here anyways. Those are little things that is really, really impactful to me. Like hearing some of their stories, I'm just saying, I was unemployed for so long and I couldn't find, and I tried. Now I can do this, and I'm a single mom. That's what it's about for me at this point. That's what really, really gets me going. And I'm like, if I've done that once, can I do that for 500 people? Then can I do it for 5,000? And then they're going to impact all these. So it's almost like a snowball effect. And then the people around you start noticing that, and they want to be a part of that. So it's almost like this culture that starts feeding on itself, and then better and better leaders keep emerging from this company.
What other initiatives are you launching this year that you're excited about?
For the first time ever, we're doing a joint venture partnership, which we're going to roll out starting in a few months, where we are allowing dentists to partner with us to own an ideal dental in a location or geography they care about. And really, the way that stemmed was, for the longest time, we felt like we've put the systems and we have this great training program. So why give away any ownership? And we've have different kinds of ownership. We've got equity ownership, and people can co-invest in the parent company. But I was at a dental conference in Boston early last year with my 9-year-old, and I took him to my dental school on a Friday afternoon after the conference. And we ran into like a 4th-year dental student in the elevator, and we just said hi. That was about it. And then the next morning, we went to the gym, and there was a basketball area. So my 9-year-old was playing basketball. I was working out, and I saw someone talking to my son. Now, being a protective dad, I kind of ran over, different city, new place. I'm like, what's going on? And he was like, oh, I ran into you guys in the elevator. I'm a student at Tufts Dental School, and I saw you there. And it's like, oh, great. And he was like, what year did you graduate? And, I told him, and he's like, great. Look, I'm going to be looking at contracts and stuff. Could I get your number and stuff? I'd love your advice. I may ping you at some time. I'm like, great. So I gave him my name, number. I went back to finishing my workout because I was like, all right, this is a safe place. My son was playing basketball. 5 minutes later, the dentist walks up to me, and he's like, hey, I just looked you up, holy cow, and so he starts going, he's like, well, like I'm from upstate New York and third generation. I went to the local school and I went to church there. And I'd love to have a dental office there. Would you do an ideal dental with me out there? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And I was just like, yeah, why not? And so as the company kind of grew, we're doing 30 plus de novos builds a year. But there's so many dentists in today's environment where they're coming out, they want to live in a certain spot. There's tons of competition from all the other DSOs. They know they're going to be good dentists, but there's the business of any healthcare business, any business has gotten so complicated today with the legal and the real estate and the construction and the supply equipment credentialing, payers, all of that stuff. I'm just so excited because now for once we can say, hey, you want to be in the Michigan area. Great. We wouldn't have typically gone there, but we like you as a dentist. We think you'll be a great clinical extension of us. We're going to do all our research. We're going to present you with the 20 best spots. We're going to present you where all the growth is happening. And we have a great analytics model that we all use. So all this stuff we already have. It's not like we're recreating it. So why not now take the best, dentists and partner with them in a joint venture where they have ownership and now they get to participate in the wealth creation opportunity, not just at the office level where, they're producing and they have equity and distributions, but now that is worth so much more when it's part of like this big kind of mothership and that gets, revalued. So that has become so much fun because it's not just about getting rich. It's about creating real wealth for dentists who took a chance on you, just like I took a chance or someone took a chance on me at some point, So that's one of the most exciting kind of things on the horizon.
That's really cool. When is that launching?
We're going to launch that in July, to the outside world. And internally, we've already kind of done a soft launch.
One of my favorite quotes is by an old sales trainer, but it was, you can have anything you want in life if you help enough people get what they want. And, it's a really kind of neat motion that you're able to be out there and support. And I love the story that it was, you're at the dental school and you have this, ambitious young dental student that's looking to make a better life for themselves. So
I think in a lot of ways, Mike, I think that is like we never stop learning, right? So why stop growing if you're never going to stop learning? Because until that point, I was like, yeah, I thought about it before, but there was never really a reason to. But seeing like the look of hope in this kid's eyes and just being, would you? And like, I'd love to have an ideal dental and I know where, I have 3 locations in mind. And it was like, you could just kind of feel like it went from, I'm graduating, I don't know what I'm going to do, to like, would you, and I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? That excitement is what keeps us growing, and that growth is fun.
A couple more questions, then we'll wrap here. I want to be conscious of your time. You just mentioned like the perpetual learning and reading your book. I could tell that you really are a student of business. You tell stories about different companies and you talk about Amazon and Starbucks and what they do. Where do you go to learn? Do you have any books or podcasts that you recommend, or what's kind of like your method of, continuing to learn and grow?
I hate admitting this, but I never really had like a mentor growing up. And especially if you're in the dental space, it's just really tough because it's not like 500 people who've done amazing things and you can just pick and choose. So a lot of it was just kind of figuring it out on your own. And then I think there's little pieces you take from different books. The truth is, I think just like my book, there's not everything that's going to apply to everybody. The goal is, and especially when this got picked up by a publisher, it has to be a broader audience. You have to tweak certain things in your book so that, the one size fits all to some extent. I don't really have any one source that I'm crazy about. And a lot of times when I've pivoted in that direction, the more you kind of start learning, you're like, all right, well, it was good over here, but now I'm getting in. It's like the philosophy is a little bit different and the goals are a little bit different. And some of it is like a sales pitch, where it's like, let me get you on the hook. And then you have like these salespeople calling you need to enroll in this program. And so I kind of shy away from a little bit of that. But I think there's been, I think like, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I thought that was an interesting one. And the part that resonated with me the most was when he talks about how he first sold Nike, and I think it was 170 million or something in that range. And, it was raining the next morning. He woke up and he put on his old running shoes and went for a run, which is what he did any other day. And I think that's his way of saying everything changed, but nothing really changed. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, when you have those big kind of events where it's not about the money anymore. It's a real test of like what happens. And there's that when you're young, there's that initial thing like, well, I should be acting differently. And then as you mature through that, you're almost like, I don't want to be different. I just don't even care if anybody knows. I'm good. I'm so comfortable in what it is, and my goals are very different. And so I think it's evolving to that point that, those are the kind of books and things I kind of find helpful.
Dr. Ahmed, I really appreciate the time. So Make Them Smile, where will people be able to find it? It's Amazon.
It's sold everywhere books are sold. So Barnes and Noble, Apple is going to have it. The audio version's out on Audible already. But yeah, you can order it on Amazon, Target. It's going to be sold everywhere, luckily. So hearing more comments, and hopefully it helps some people out.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining the podcast. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Bye.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.